a few months ago in the New European newspaper. If you don't know about the New European, you should by now. It's on the seats that you're sitting on. I ran an article under that title in which I rather vehemently attacked the political order in this country for having made such a terrible mess of us and of how things are now. The referendum itself, the way it was run, the way the outcome was treated, what's happening since then, the extraordinary fact that the majority of MPs in the House of Commons, the great majority of the members of the House of Lords are all Remainers, don't want Brexit to happen, desperate for an excuse to stop it, and yet, for all the wrong reasons, for all reasons that have to do with the sickness of our political order, the over-discipline of the party system, the fact that we have an extremely distorting way of running votes in this country. I mean, most MPs sit in the House of Commons on percentages of the popular vote in their constituencies, which are about similar to the proportion of people who voted Leave in the referendum. That's about 37% of the electorate. And for that reason, they think it was a democratic vote. And that was why these absurd remarks were made. The people have spoken. Britain has voted to leave. Do you know what? One of the great lessons of Brexit has been how many millions of people in this country love the EU and want to stay in it. That is one of the big lessons that's come out of Brexit. Again, you look at those numbers. You look at the fact that 37% of an electorate that was restricted because you guys weren't allowed to vote in it, and because 16 and 17-year-olds who had a very material interest in the outcome weren't allowed to vote in it, and because Britons who'd been living abroad for 15 years or more weren't allowed to vote in it, and those three constituencies are very important ones. They were the ones most affected by the vote, but they were excluded, not by accident, not by oversight, but deliberately. So, when one looks back at how this all happened, when one remembers that this was a result of this toxic internal squabble that the Conservative Party's been having with itself forever, you realize that this is not just a mistake, not just a very bad outcome, but something that never should have happened. And it exposes what is the really serious problem with our political and our government order. So when I wrote that article, J'accuse, I was putting on record the whole series of reasons why, when we've sorted this Brexit mess out, we have to turn our attention to the way things are done in this country in political and governmental respects. But that is for another day. We've got to resist first and reform later. But I did want to get it on the record there. There's no question of taking us back 2-3 years and trying to rerun the whole show. We are where we are now, and that's the task that we're faced with, which is to do one of the following two things, because one of these following two things will inevitably happen. Either Brexit will be stopped, or it will be reversed. The worst case scenario is that there will be a very temporary period of time in which we are half in the EU or apparently, vaguely trembling on the brink on the outside. But over the next couple of years, maybe next 2, 3, 5 years, we will see this process reversed if it gets that far. Pure demographics tells us so. You only have to look at the fact that well over 3/4 of the 18 to 25-year-old population in this country were emphatically pro-EU. They are going to be the ones in the driving seat when it comes to voting on these matters in coming general elections. And the idea that the UK's future belongs in the EU is an idea that is never going to die. And that is why the worst case scenario is that we are going to have a pretty rocky time for a little while because of the stupidity of this process, but we will be back in the EU. We're a European country. We're a population which is increasingly self-identifies as European as well as British. And so we can take comfort from future history. Even better, however, is the prospect that we might be able to stop Brexit. And that prospect has just improved this very day. I don't know whether you've been following the news at all today, but one thing you will have noticed is that David Davis has been reminded of the route from here to Brussels, managed to get there for the first time since November last year. But in the period since he last visited, and I suppose both people on this side of the channel and people on the other side of the channel are delighted that he hasn't been travelling. In those 4 months, the people who have been discussing how things should proceed at the moment are, of course, our civil servants and civil servants in the Commission. More sensible people. You will know that something like 148% of members of the civil service in this country are very pro-EU. So if you leave it up to them to make some running on the negotiations front, you're going to be pretty sure that there's going to be an outcome that, when you read between the lines, is a very helpful one to our great pro-EU cause. Because what has happened, what we've seen announced today, is that March 2019, has been turned into December 2020. That is the one thing which has happened in the negotiation. There's been this so-called transition period, which means that the cliff edge has been pushed back to Christmas time 2020. I am pretty confident, as a result of this fact, that the great Christmas present we're all going to get in 2020 is permanent continued membership of the EU. Because stretch out the amount of time that we've all got to work against this thing, to campaign against it, to get a vote on whether we want to continue with this, to update the country's attitude to its relationship with Europe. Give us more time to do that, and we've got a greater chance of stopping it. So either we're going to stop it, or if some version of it happens, you may remember, people have commented often enough that with the marvellous relationship that the United Kingdom has with the EU, because of all its opt-outs and special deals and exclusions, we've always had, sort of 1.5 feet in the EU. And the question is, if there were a temporary soft Brexit arrangement, the one that I say we could reverse in just a very few years, it will simply be a matter of which foot is in the EU and which half of the other foot is. So I think we have everything to play for, everything to look forward to, great confidence that we should think of our country, the UK, as being part of our greater homeland, which is Europe. We should think of that with confidence. And that, therefore, gives us an answer to your question. Your question is, should I stay or should I go? And the answer to your question is, you should stay. You should stay. You are our fellows. You are as much a part of us as we are of you. I mean, think of how many people who, in this country, British people in this country, who have realized as a result of the Brexit process, how deeply attached they are to their European identity. Now, I'm going to tell you a little anecdote. When I was a little boy, I lived in the middle of Africa. My father was working out in the last fading, diminishing remnants of the British Empire, and we spent our time very, very far from civilization, very far from television. We used to get newspapers 2 or 3 days late. Occasionally we could listen to the BBC World Service if there weren't too many local storms and electrical static in the atmosphere. So we were very cut off and very remote. And in those parts of Africa, you didn't go for country walks because you get eaten by lions or trampled by elephants. And so we spent all our time reading, which I suppose is a good thing. I would always say that the grown-ups in those situations had alcohol and adultery to keep them occupied, but we children, we had to spend our time reading. So when people say, where did you live when you were a child? The most natural answer I could give to them is ancient Greece and Rome, because I spent all my time reading about Greek myths and Roman history and Horatius and the Bridge and so on. And I listened to music. I listened to Beethoven and Debussy. And I looked with longing and yearning at catalogues of paintings or books about great galleries like the Kunsthistorisches Museum in Vienna. I lived my childhood in Europe, in the culture of Europe, in this great shared, wonderful, rich, deep identity that we have as Europeans. It never occurred to me to think that Socrates and Beethoven and Debussy and Vermeer and so on were somehow foreigners or strangers. On the contrary. And when the idea of having to have a passport to cross a boundary was first mooted to me, I was outraged. I thought that it was a completely stupid idea. So when the European Union came into existence, or the original EEC, freedom of movement was mooted, the idea that we could get around our European homeland easily, quickly, swiftly, with no bother, where we could recognize no matter whether the person's first language was Italian or French or German or Dutch or Spanish. It didn't matter. We were all just one great family. That seemed to me to be the most natural thing in the world. And indeed, it is still an outrage now. I'm as irritated as all hell when I have to stand in a queue with my passport to get back into the UK when I've popped over to Paris. And I still think that in this evolution that has been speeded up by Brexit, because I think, you see, what's going to happen is that our realization of our European identity and what we share with everybody in Europe, what this is going to do is going to speed up integration in Europe in the medium and longer term. And that integration is going to include us here in the UK. I think that I could prognosticate with great confidence. And by the way, very, very often one gets asked, what do you think is going to happen about this and about that? And I always say, back before the First World War, and people noticed that biplanes flew better than monoplanes. And so when they thought, what will the aeroplanes of the future be like? They said, well, they'll have 12 wings. Well, you can get predictions wrong. But I've never felt more confident in my life about anything than that we will be in the EU, either because we stop Brexit or we reverse it in a few years' time. And that when we are fully and confidently and completely in the EU with this dreadful episode in our history behind us, it will be as fully members of the EU, more fully than we are now. We will be able to go on the Eurostar without having to take a passport. This is a prediction that I will make. I intend to stay alive until I can do it, and I should get all that time will remain a great campaigner for our commitment to the European ideal. So the answer to your question is stay. Stay, help this process to work out. It does, however, mean that you are going to have to keep on campaigning. Indeed, all of us are going to have to keep on campaigning. Firstly, there is the great campaign to try to shorten the misery by stopping Brexit. I mean, it just lengthens things if it's a matter of having to reverse it in a few years' time, but if we can stop it, all the better. So we should all be party to that. We should also all be party. Those of us here who are UK citizens anyway, as well as European citizens, don't forget that we UK citizens are European citizens as well, all right? So when we talk about retaining our European citizenship, that's a very big deal for those of us in the UK who want that. And we also want our fellow EU citizens from other European countries to be able to stay here too and to continue to make the great contribution that they do make. Because my word, our fellows from all around Europe do make a huge contribution to us. I beg people, I beg them, if they are leavers, to look at just a couple of minutes of YouTube footage of Europe in 1945. I ask them, can you imagine now what contribution, what depth and breadth of contribution the great European project, this great idealistic imaginative project which is the EU, can you imagine what it has done to save us from any repetition of that? Just look at that. I then ask them to look at a few minutes footage, YouTube footage of our fair island in the 1970s, with this 3-day week and its strikes and its piles of uncollected garbage, and the fact that the economy was tanking and that the Chancellor of the Exchequer had to go cap in hand to the IMF to beg and borrow some money. Look at the graph of the growth in GDP in this country since the 1970s, making the United Kingdom the 5th richest country in the world. Look at the experience of Germany, which is an economic powerhouse. Look at how it has traded, how it has expanded, how its economy has blossomed because of the fact that along with all its partners in the European Union, it's been able to have the muscle to do this. The European Union as a bloc, as an integrated economic entity, is second only to China in GDP. It's a greater GDP than the United States of America. It drops behind the US and the American and the British economy if the British economy were to leave the EU. But that won't be for long. The EU is the place of energy, of innovation, of imagination. The Europe that we all know and love has, since the 16th century, transformed the world utterly when you consider all the great developments that occurred in the scientific revolution and the Enlightenment. They're both in scientific and political, philosophical, literary and cultural terms. And that is all here. Our heritage is still with us and still powering us in what we do. So Europe is a great player on the world stage. But unlike the other two great players, the US and China, it is the model that we would wish the rest of the world to follow. Soft power model, a model of cooperation, of unity, of progressive ideals. The kind of economic order that the European Union has is rather different from the very jungle-like red in tooth and claw sort of capitalism that you see in the United States or the state capitalism of China. We are a country where the country of Europe, we're a country where people matter and where human concerns lie front and center in almost everything that the European Union does. And that is something which is so precious, so worth defending and fostering, that the idea that we might drop out, become a third-party state, be detached, try to emulate the model either of the US or, God forbid, although there are certain people in our country who shall forever remain Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage and so on, who would like us to follow the Chinese model, no doubt. Can you imagine? Party Secretary Boris Johnson running things for the rest of his life like Xi Jinping. No, we have something which is truly and genuinely worth fighting for, the European dream. All the difficulties and flaws, and in view of building something this imaginative, this great, taking this long, there's so much to do, so many details to fine-tune, so many problems sometimes to overcome. Of course there are going to be difficulties and problems. It's natural. But one doesn't run away from them. One commits oneself to making them better. That's what I very much hope as a Brit myself, that the UK will always be committed to doing on either of the two outcomes, the stop Brexit outcome or the reverse Brexit outcome. But because it's one of those two outcomes, because if we don't stop it, we'll reverse it, we should stay. You should stay. Answer this question. We're not going to go. Instead, we're going to put our efforts and our energies into making sure that this country, the United Kingdom, is a member of the European Union in perpetuity and with security in that stance in the coming years. So don't give up the fight. There is a great deal to be gained, too much to be lost to make it worthwhile. And the good news is this. And here, if you've seen that rather dreadful version of the movie of Churchill, you see that movie, Churchill, the Dark Year? Don't bother to go and see it. But the main thing it tells you about Churchill is that he didn't know what he was doing and drank too much until he made a famous speech. But if you look at that idea of Churchill's, that you should keep faith in the very darkest stretch of the way because, lo, there will be help coming from the West. Well, it won't be the West that the help is coming from. The help is coming from us. Things are changing. The mood is altering in this country. The idea that there has to be a vote on whether we go ahead with this, that we have to update, that the politicians, pusillanimous as they are, what a dreadful bunch they've turned out to be, that they are going to have to be forced into allowing so-called we the people, now that we know so much more about things, to have a say on the matter. That, it seems to me, is an inevitability. And that is why I'm confident that our future is in the EU, and that is why you should stay. Thank you. Now, I was told to keep it short because you've been running late today, so I've kept it very short, as you can see, in the hope that we might have a couple of questions, a couple of comments. Questions, comments, or complaints, by the way. Any of those will do. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you what you think the fallout would be for democracy of Brexit stopping. We've had Caroline Lucas talking to us about standing down candidates during elections as if that was a wonderful thing. And I think we have a talk later about tactical voting, again, as if that's a wonderful thing. And the idea of a second referendum, call it a vote on the deal or whatever. But what will that actually do for this country, for next generation or 2 generations hence, to the idea of democracy?
Well, if your regular bedtime reading is my article J'accuse, you will see in there that I answer those questions by saying what this episode in our history has done is to tear the lid off the dysfunctionality of our political order. You know, firstly, we have a first-past-the-post voting system, which is pretty dreadful when you consider it. Very easy to see why this system doesn't work. Imagine a constituency of 100 voters and 10 people standing for election, 8 of whom get 10 votes each, 1 of whom gets 9 votes, and 1 gets 11 votes, and he's the one who goes to Parliament, leaving the other 89 people unrepresented. And this is typically what happens. The majority of voters in this country at every general election are left unrepresented in Parliament. That's got to stop. If we had a proportional representation system, there would be more Greens. There would be more Caroline Lucases in the House of Commons. Can you imagine that? Maturity, good sense, clarity, good principles. I mean, we wouldn't recognize it. So the lid has been taken off the dysfunctionality of our order. We see the following astonishing fact. Now, I'm afraid there's something else that you might have to read at bedtime to get the full download on this. But since this is not a commercial break, I won't mention the title of my book, Democracy in its Crisis. But you will, if you would have a look at that, there you will see the problem which has arisen from the increase of democracy in the sense of a widening of the franchise of voters. Because as that has happened, so political parties have become more and more disciplined and controlled. With the result that the MPs that you vote for to Parliament don't represent you or your interests or the interests of the country. They represent their party line. Here is something that should make you angry, and you should think of it every single day of your life until this Brexit nonsense is over. And that is in March last year, when the notification bill was passed in the House of Commons, MP after MP after MP after MP went into the lobby to support the passing of that bill from both the major parties, saying, this is a terrible idea, we shouldn't be doing it. So why the hell were they going into the lobby? Because they were being whipped in. Now, one needs to know something about the whipping system of party discipline here. It's a big deal. If you don't obey the party whip, the party is going to say to you, we're not going to support you at the next election. Your job's over. We're not going to give you any money or support or big name people to come and support your election chances. That's A. That's the blackmail. The bribery is, if you vote the party line, if you're a good party person and you support what we're trying to do, no matter what you personally think about it, you get a chance of ministerial office. That's the bribery. So, given that politicians, well, there are some very good politicians, a few. Not many, but a few. You may have heard that phrase somewhere before. Generally speaking, they're a pusillanimous bunch, so they do what they're told by the party whips. In any case, the party whips have said to them, when they first arrived in Parliament, freshly elected, they said, oh my God, we're so pleased that you've been elected. You're just what we need in Parliament and in our party. You've got a great future before you now. In order to ensure that that great future is not upset by anything, you better tell us all your secrets. I mean, how are things going on with you and your secretary? Have you ever had your fingers in the till? You tell us these things, and when the Daily Mail starts trying to spill the beans on you, we can protect your back. 2 weeks later, you're told to vote for something that you think is a complete no-no. You say, I can't possibly vote for that. They say, if you don't, it's all going to be in the Daily Mail tomorrow morning. That's the blackmail part of it again. And this happens. I'm not making it up. Talk to MPs, they'll tell you it actually happens. The party discipline system, the whipping system, has subverted our democracy. So first past the post and party discipline are just 2 of a number of things that have got to be changed. Because if we didn't have them, if we had a PR system, if we had a system in Parliament where MPs voted their judgment and their conscience on non-manifesto matters, we would not have Brexit today. We would not have Brexit today. So don't forget these things, okay? We need to accuse the system and get it right. Think of historians in 50 or 100 or 500 years' time when they look back on this blip in the history of the EU and the history of this country. Let us hope that it will just be a blip. People might say, oh, it was a wonderful opportunity. People woke up to the fact that their political order was absolutely rubbish, and they went and did something about it. First, they stopped all that Brexit nonsense, and then they put things right. Let that be the outcome of what we're doing in this process, which is another reason why you should stay.
Yes, thank you very much. Very, very interesting, and I love the combative mode. I'm wondering if David can save Goliath instead of killing Goliath. And because of the democracy in this country, the Irish can actually vote. And Ryanair was very helpful in bringing a few Irish to vote. Today, there's about 1 million UK citizens that are trying to get Irish citizenship. Mm-hmm. Some of them actually voted for Brexit, but they still think it works both ways. Wouldn't there be a point in getting the 3 million Irish to come over, get that referendum or get that next vote coming? Just start planning on getting a lot of Irish to come over and save Goliath.
What a fantastic idea. I can just see. That is such a fantastic and wonderful idea, and I can just see the flotilla of little boats going from the Pembrokeshire coast to bring the Irish over, you know, shades of Dunkirk. It would be a bit like Dunkirk. I think that's a completely wonderful idea. Just as realistic as that idea, because it is a realistic idea, and we'll do something about it. Come and rescue us, our Irish cousins will say, is the fact that you and all the Irish, and indeed everybody with a vote in the local elections in May, you have a big hand to play here. Tactical voting can be extremely powerful and sending a message. I mean, the one thing, told you that there's a majority of Remain in both the House of Commons and the House of Lords. And the one thing that those timid, pusillanimous, party line towing MPs are desperate for is an excuse to stop this. And the excuse, capital T, capital E, is a change in public opinion. And the biggest change in public opinion that could be registered is a massive anti-Brexit vote in the May local elections. So that matters. I know you're going to have a talk on that after this, which is really, really significant. But I'm with you on that. Now, I was over in Dublin a couple of months ago touring that book. And I was told by the publicist there that Wilbur Smith, you know him, he's the chap who writes all those novels about Africa, that he's just got Irish citizenship. To lucky bugger. And you know how? Because his deceased former wife was Irish. Now, this is Ireland for you, You can have your Irish wife could be dead, but you can still on that basis get it. I thought to myself, my God, I've got an opportunity here. I was once married to an Irish woman. She's still alive, God bless her. But I was just thinking, do you think on the basis that I've divorced, because I've got Irish descendants, and I haven't got any Irish ancestors, there's the rub. But if I went to the Irish and I said, look, I used to be married to an Irish citizen, could I please be an Irish citizen now? Whether they would agree. Now, one of my favourite jokes that I tell my students is the one about the old Irish lady who was asked if she believed in leprechauns. And she said, I do not, but they're there anyway. And I thought, well, in a country which allows that kind of thinking, I'm sure they would say yes, but I haven't tried yet. Do you want me to stop now?
It's okay. Professor Grayling, your words warmed my heart. Can I ask you, your predictions are based only on optimism or on real facts?
On a combination of the two. Firstly, people say, oh, you're a natural optimist. And I say, what's the alternative? You find a high building and jump off. But there are facts. Now, I have the very, very great privilege and pleasure to chair a regular meeting, coordinating forum for all the major Remain groups in the country. I can tell you there are a lot of very, very dedicated, very well-thinking, smart, well-organized groups that are working to stop Brexit or to prepare the ground for reversing Brexit, which is what a soft Brexit could be, because as you know, when you look at the details, a soft Brexit is no Brexit at all. It keeps all our acquis, where all our conditions of membership remain the same as they will now on the basis of this deal until December 2020. So it is automatic. It's the throw of a switch to get us back in. So either we stop it or reverse it. These groups are working very hard to do it. I have the privilege to chair that meeting. Mike is a member of it. A number of people here speaking today who are members of it, in fact. And so there's a lot of hard and good work being done to bring about this result that I mentioned, namely the long-term, permanent, secure membership of the EU of this country, either through stopping Brexit or subsequently reversing it. So there is a good foundation in facts about the endeavour, facts about the change in public opinion. We had a presentation of private polling and focus group work done recently, which there were some very, very promising signs in that. Still a lot of work to be done, a lot of work to be done for the general cause of stopping Brexit. And, of course, a lot of work to be done by our fellow EU citizens from other EU countries living and working and making their contribution here, because I don't think we should let up on this point. We shouldn't let up on the fact that the tenure of residency, of membership of the community here must be secured. It is, by quite a long stretch, one of the most disgusting things that's happened in this country, that citizens of other EU countries living and working here should be being treated as they are at the moment. It's one of the most appalling things. I can't believe it of my fellow Brits that this is in any way tolerable, and it isn't tolerable. But the work on that has to be kept up, just as the work has to be kept up on Brits themselves keeping their EU citizenship, no matter what happens. So there's a lot to be done, and one must not stop fighting. Thank you very much, everybody.